webstertarpley.net, one of the scenarios produced during 2007 by the Office of Net Assessment through the Hudson Institute is the Great Siberian War of 2030, which is, as the title suggests, something we've talked about here quite a few times, the idea of playing Russia against China. And it starts off saying Russia is hollowing out, China is filling up, China needs oil, Siberia has lots of oil, very few people. The Chinese are going to try to seize Siberia. The Chinese will try to seize all of Russia west of the east of the Urals, and that's going to lead to World War III, and it goes through. This is the work of the late Laurent Muraviec of the Hudson Institute. He put this out in 2007. The contract came from the Office of Net Assessment, that is to say Yoda being Andrew Marshall, 89 years old, been there since 1973. He may well be the longest-serving top bureaucrat in the entire U.S. bureaucracy. This is a gray eminence with a vengeance, and he goes back to the post-war Rand Corporation whiz kids, right? The Strangeloves, the guys going around with those binders, world targets, and megadeths, right? The Strangeloves from the original generation. He's still a younger, younger than those who are no longer around. This is Andrew Marshall, and his group recommends essentially they say in order to have successful deception, you've got to create a sophisticated series of orchestrated events and make your adversary believe in it. Now, think about the Gulf. Think about the Christmas Patsy bomber. Think about Major Hassan of Fort Hood. Think about Al-Awlaki, the CIA lackey, and you'll get an idea of all of that. Let's just go back briefly to China. We've so far indicated the areas of conflict, U.S. meddling to antagonize China, and I think most of these are pretty straightforward. Meddling in Taiwan, meddling in Tibet, meddling among the Uyghurs of Xinjiang, meddling in the South China Sea. That's a little bit, there are claims, right? There are competing international claims. I suppose one ought to have an international conference, see who wants it and who doesn't. Cyberspace and Google. Let's just remember, and I thank Wayne Madsen for this. Wayne Madsen points out that the origins of Google are largely in the U.S. intelligence community, and one of these is an organization called In-Q-Tel of Arlington, Virginia, but with other branches in California. This is a non-profit venture capital firm, and I'm reading from Wikipedia, non-profit venture capital firm that invests in high-tech companies for the sole purpose of keeping the CIA equipped with the latest in information technology to support the U.S. intelligence capability. It was originally named Peleus. It was also known as InQit or InQIT, and became In-Q-Tel, I-N-Q, the letter Q, -T-E-L, In-Q-Tel, launched in 1999. Hey, about the same time as Google. The mission is to essentially be at the forefront of all this stuff. So In-Q-Tel offers money, and they get a piece of the action. They get software infrastructure and related stuff. George Tenet writes about this in his biographic self-justification attempt, and that is to say, in the eye of the storm, at the center of the storm, my years at the CIA, Harper, 1997, and that we learn about In-Q-Tel. In 2005, In-Q-Tel sold 5,600 shares of Google worth $2.2 million, and the way they got them was that Google acquired Operation Keyhole being the CIA's satellite mapping software, which has now taken on the name of Google Earth. So there's a seamless cartel here, NSA, CIA, Google, I'm sure, Twitter, and others. This, I think, puts the question of cyberspace into a different context, because it's no longer a question of free speech or things like this. It is that do you allow tentacles of foreign intelligence agencies to simply run wild, or do you have the ability to do something about that and to push back? The path of the Ukrainian elections, right? Yushchenko now being out, it's now come down to Yanukovych versus Timoshenko, and that'll be decided this coming weekend. But the Orange Revolution in Kiev, November 2005, within about 5 years, that had completely dissolved into dust and ashes, similar to Obama in some ways. But you have this, essentially the idea is that a color revolution requires the presence of a large cushion of young dupes. And that's one of the keys to Obama. It's one of the keys to Yushchenko taking power with the Orange Revolution. And the madman Saakashvili in Georgia, perhaps the worst of all of them. So do you let foreign intelligence agencies come in and mess with your inevitable population of idealistic young dupes and turn them into a battering ram for a seizure of power and the overthrow of the government based on essentially hysteria? In other words, not based on elections, but based on overthrowing elections, or at least the only elections you've had get overthrown. So that is, I think, the Chinese argument, and I think it's a good debate. Remember, Jacques Sapir, S-A-P-I-R, I think one of his ideas was that the sloganeering about human rights and political rights has been used by the Western powers as a cloak for imperialist aggression and destabilization and the overthrow of governments they don't like for totally other reasons, generally because of economic resistance to the IMF. The slogans have been used so often that they're now totally discredited, and that is just the reality of the world, right? The attack on Iraq, 1 million to 2 million people killed in the name of democracy. Doesn't that sort of take the luster off these democracy and human rights slogans, even when they're delivered by the charming Obama? So the areas of sovereignty are Taiwan, Tibet, the Uyghurs of Xinjiang, the South China Sea, and cyberspace with Google now revealed as a tentacle of InQT, InQtel, and therefore of NSA and CIA, and they're out there openly cavorting with the NSA. It's like a public alliance. It's like a convoy in World War II. In this case, the NSA provides the cyber warships, and Google provides the payload, in this case, of inflammatory propaganda for these young dupes who believe that the West is cool and they want to go with it. So let's also add human rights, right? You've got a return now in the pages of the U.S. press to the Chinese human rights issues. This is fairly straightforward. In economics, you've got a conflict about the proper valuation of the Chinese yuan or renminbi, people's dollar, and that is simply that China wants to have the predictability of a fixed parity relationship with their main international trading partner, the U.S. Now, I would say you don't want to destroy the one fixed parity you seem to have. You want to make sure that everybody gets a fixed parity. That is the genius of Bretton Woods. That is why Bretton Woods allowed the fastest development rates we've ever had in world history before or since. But the U.S. says, no, we want to destroy the fixed parity of the renminbi with the U.S. dollar. There's also then the question of steel and oil protectionism. This is one area where I think the Chinese are simply wrong, but that's one of the things that they cite. We'll be back in a minute.